Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. My two favorite football teams are the Kansas City Chiefs and the St. Louis Rams. Obviously, I've spent about a decade cheering for the underdog, and about a decade not seeing very many games won by either of the two teams. When I watch a football game, college or pro, and I don't care that much who wins, I pick the one that's not the favorite and try to cheer for that team. I'm for the underdog. Today's story is one that's really, really familiar to most everybody. It's about an underdog and an underdog conquering. It's the story of David and Goliath. But I want to look at a little bit of the background and a little bit of what's going on between the lines and in the scenes here in this David and Goliath story. Because I want you to see David as not only just this innocent shepherd boy who is going to be the next king of Israel, but also as a rather shrewd politician and a calculating, not in a negative sense necessarily, but a calculating person, understanding that what he's doing puts him in good stead with this nation. David's going to bring lunch to his brothers, who are sort of in this stalemate. Actually, it's in a situation that's a pretty humane way to fight a war. The Philistines have challenged the Israelites. They ran out their great big 10-foot tall dude here and said, anybody want to fight him, we'll let the battle rest on just this one hand-to-hand combat thing. Whoever wins, wins, and whoever loses, loses. So Israel is sitting there looking at this giant, this Goliath, and saying, who are we going to send out there? The king makes an offer, Saul. He says, if you go out and fight this guy, I'll give you a lot of riches. Your family will be free. You won't be slaves or servants to the king. And furthermore, you'll get to marry my daughter. David shows up with the lunchbox for his brothers. And he's looking around at what's going on, and no Israelite will go out there and fight this battle. And David says, I don't know if this ever makes the Sunday school lessons, but he says, what do you get if you go out there? And they explain to him what you get. You get wealth, you get your family freedom, and you get to marry the king's daughter, which actually puts you in good position to be a major player in the administration of the current king and maybe beyond. So David says, I'll take that guy on. So he puts on armor, which he can't hardly walk in, has to take it off. He can't handle the armor. He takes his slingshot, and I always pictured, when I pictured this in Sunday school, the slingshot with the forked branches. That's not the kind of slingshot. It's two straps with a pouch, and then that thing is swung around and around and around. And when you get to go to full speed, you let one of those straps go, and that stone goes flying out of there at incredible speeds. And David picks up 5 stones. You have to wait till you get to heaven and ask him why 5. I have a hunch he wasn't real sure he was going to nail that guy on the first one and wanted extra ammunition. He could run around out of his reach for a while and fling stones at him for a little while. So he picks up 5 smooth stones and goes down, and he takes on Goliath. You know the story. 1 stone between the eyes, deader than a doornail. What you may not know is the rest of the story. Verse 50, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine. You got a dead giant here. And David with his slingshot, and took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him and cut his head off with it. We don't usually get that in the Sunday school stories. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled, and the men of Israel and Judah rose with a shout and pursued the Philistines as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, so that the wounded Philistines fell on the way from Sha'arim as far as Gath and Ekron. And the Israelites came back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp. Notice the next line, verse 54. And David took the head of the Philistine, remember he cut his head off, and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. Now that's interesting from a couple standpoints. Number one, David takes the trophy. And the trophy is the head of this giant Philistine. We're also told he takes it to Jerusalem. That could not be immediate because the Israelites do not hold Jerusalem at that time. The Jebusites hold Jerusalem. It would not be until David's king that he goes in and takes Jerusalem. So David hauled this head of this Goliath around with him for a number of years. I don't know where on the mantle, trophy case, I don't know. But he had this thing with him until he takes over at Jerusalem as king, until he takes Jerusalem as an Israelite city now, and is king of the nation, and installs that head as a trophy there in Israel. I'm sure that head was important to him as a trophy because it marked the beginning of his rise to power. The nation of Israel would recognize the courage that it took for this shepherd boy to go against Goliath, this shepherd boy with only a slingshot, to take on Goliath and all his armor and all his size and all his strength. God works some mighty things through little ways sometimes, and David's story is a story of God working through a fairly insignificant, seemingly insignificant person at that point in history to bring about his will for his people.